Tired of outdated marketing advice aimed at the industrial and manufacturing space? My name is Selim Maalouf. Join me and my co-host Chris Carolyn as we deliver candid insights from growth-minded leaders, helping you drive results and tackle modern challenges. Cut through the noise to get no-nonsense expertise. Welcome to the Manufacturing Marketing Show. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Manufacturing Marketing Show. I'm thrilled to welcome Lee Densmer to the show today. She's the owner of Globia, a content marketing agency focused on helping global B2B brands with their content strategy, planning, and execution. Lee brings over 10 years of content marketing experience from her time at SaaS and service companies, where she honed her skills in strategy, planning, and content development. She's a talented writer with experience creating blog posts, case studies, ebooks, social media snippets, video scripts, emails, and landing pages. Lee also has 23 years of experience in the translation and localization industry, and with her multicultural background and passion for global adventure, she was born in Peru and has lived and studied, worked, and traveled in 8 Spanish-speaking countries. Lee has a unique perspective on engaging global audiences. Through Globia, Lee helps small B2B marketing teams convert global customers with expert content strategy, precise editorial management, top-notch content development, and comprehensive translation planning. I'm excited to dive into her insights today. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I love that intro. Can I get a copy of it?
I believe this one exists on your website, so you've done an amazing job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Lee, Chris and I, as we just discussed, started our entrepreneurial, expedition recently in September, and we're interested in learning more about your journey and what led you to, go independent and found Globia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my business about 10 months ago. After having had a great experience learning, just soaking up everything I could at different SaaS firms and different translation companies, and realizing across them all that they had the same gaps and they had the same needs, and that I could fill those needs with the things that I have learned. Always underhanded with content development, lots of struggling managing the content development agencies because they don't have time. Lack of strategic knowledge. I mean, there are a list of struggles and challenges that most businesses struggle with when it comes to content. So the need was there. And it was the time in my life to do something new, to do something different, to flex that muscle. I would have regretted never trying it. So I went for it.
And I can't wait to get to the translation and localization piece of all this. But let's start at the beginning, I guess. And why is content marketing, so important now more than ever when it comes to business growth?
That's a great question. So content marketing has 6 times the ROI of other marketing disciplines. Okay. So that underscores how important it is the business should try to focus on it. And moving into 2024, it seems more than ever, and especially with AI, and I really don't want to talk about AI today. We can, but there's that. With AI, relationship marketing is more important than ever, and you do that through content. You build relationships through content, through useful, engaging, interesting, relevant content. So moving forward, I see that the relationship aspect that's driven by content is going to be what's the most important for B2Bs to think about when they're trying to reach their audiences.
I understand that. And, I think it hasn't been hard to gain that understanding, from a high level at the organizations I've been at. But the challenge usually comes when, okay, we're going to do it and we're going to try and do it in the same way we've done the other stuff, which can be, easily turning on the Google Ads money faucet. That is a third hat for somebody on the staff already. And we're going to create some posts and maybe some videos if we're lucky. And, I've been lucky enough to actually bring in a content marketing team with the videographer and, you know, a focused content writer and just this strategy, right? But then there's other challenges of like other people understanding why, you know, this kind of staffing. So if you could take us there, let's say a business understands, because there's so much nuance to this that I can't wait to get into. But let's say we understand that this is going to be, in most cases, it's a brand new thing. How do we make sure we don't undersource it and, you know, give it the resources it needs?
Yeah, I'm making notes here because I've got a couple points. Probably the first thing is not to trivialize the area of specialization. So I see marketing teams give social to the intern. I see marketing teams hire a blogger, hire a writer, and call that strategy. So under resourcing or trivializing the amount of specialty expertise is required is a mistake, and I see it all the time. And I hate to say you get what you pay for, but when you make a poor intern handle a super important channel like social or like SEO, you're going to struggle with it. They're going to struggle with it, and they're not going to get the results that you want from it. So it's better to invest in a specialist.
When it comes to supporting the strategy overall, I mean, like, I guess let's start like why do they trivialize it in the first place, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what's the root cause of that? I think it's a fear of spending money for a discipline that's hard to attribute to revenue. We can talk about that in a minute, but it's very hard. It's the holy grail to attribute, this ebook to this amount of revenue. Attribution in content marketing is difficult. And often the activity is just about brand lift or just about awareness and relationship building. And those things are hard to measure. So the cold hard ROI, when you're talking to a CEO, that's what he wants, right? When you're talking to a brand manager, they get brand lift, but a CEO or a chief growth officer wants to see the tide of revenue. So attribution is hard, and that makes it hard to commit to a content marketing practice. So the proof isn't often there before you've done it for 5, 6, 7, 8 months. Yeah, especially with social, especially with SEO, the return is not overnight. Content is the long game.
I have to admit, I've been in that situation exactly. I've been in a 3-person team that was running 4 brands for an industrial group, and I was the one that got the extra social hat. Even though I believe I'm good at it, I wasn't allowed the right amount of hours to be good at it because I was also the CRM admin. I was also the webmaster. I was also, all of these things. And I was also the videographer. So, and I also wanted to write content. But the mandate that was passed down onto me was get an SEO agency to do a bunch of SEO articles so we can get traffic. And then once that's done, we get a journalist that writes about one of the brands was in the building construction industry. So let's get him to write constant contact about construction. And then we ask him to interview one of our sales teams, and then they can, plug the product. And I had no control over the message. I had no control over, what we're trying to say or the overarching strategy. But you talk about attribution, it was easy for them to equate how much money was going out to these external partners versus how much traffic is being generated on the website. It's all good. But then we come back to how much of this traffic is converting. And that's when we feel like, okay, this is not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
It all falls apart right there. Right.
Correct. And because we were not in control of the strategy, because our subject matter experts weren't involved, etc., we cannot diagnose why this is working or not working. So they just turned off the faucet, and then just content stopped, and content initiatives were looked at like, oh yeah, it's the waste of money. So I got to the point where content itself was, okay, let's not do that, but let's spend 6 figures on trade shows, and let's just turn on Google ads. Let's turn on the ads that were on 6 months ago. And it's okay. Don't spend too much time on learning how to do Google Ads properly. Full disclosure, I'm not a paid media specialist, and I was willing to put in the work to do so, but I was asked not to. Just turn on the faucet because that's what we're comfortable with. So
But do you think it's the easy button? Do you think that businesses think Google Ads, events, that's the easy button? And because content is not very well understood, especially in some industries that are maybe less mature than IT or SaaS, they just default to the easy button. Content is difficult. They don't understand who does it, how to pay for it, how to measure it. So then that means that the role of people like us is to educate. Why should you do content? How do you attribute revenue to content? How do you staff it? How do you budget for it? Why are you doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
it's frustrating sometimes being present in those conversations
Right.
and listening how much of these budgets are being allocated to things like trade shows, like in-person sales calls, sales enablement. That's easy money. Yeah, we can pay for hotels, for dinners, for drinks, for sales teams to close, but want to do a well-crafted series of articles or do content marketing videos that are not just product showcases. Sometimes we like clawing that budget feels like an impossible challenge, and
Right.
it gets disheartening for marketers like me at the time, where we don't have control over this, but we're witnessing all that budget that allegedly doesn't exist going to things that are safe but not effective.
Right. So don't send 8 guys to the conference, not 12. And let me build you a lead magnet with the leftover money. Okay. One that converts. Let me promote the crap out of it. And let me get you 200 leads next month. Like, would you trade that? Because I would trade that.
Yes, in theory, they should
theory.
be all over that for
Mhm.
sure.
Right.
But I do think it's easy button in a lot of cases, and a credit to these companies that are in it to, have healthy business, creating those easy buttons like Google Ads and email marketing vendors make it very easy to spin something up
Right.
and get some kind of signal, right? And I think that's all it takes. Like, no matter how many people you're sending to, if you get 1 or 2 leads that close, all of a sudden, like it's a tactic that worked, quote unquote.
It did work.
Right.
How well did it work? And is
Yeah.
there another tactic that would work better? And do we need to shift some money from 1989 tactic, which is wine, dine, and golf, right, to 2024 tactic, which is social, newsletters, still some SEO, right?
Right. But using some of the same principles, right? Like, I love you brought up relationship marketing earlier. It's getting harder and harder, like near impossible, depending on the industry you're in and who you're trying to reach, for a marketer who is not a subject matter expert to do any of this on your behalf, right? And what's interesting, it's for some reason it's hard to shift. Like, if you're a subject matter expert, you're usually required to support the sales process in some way. If you're not the person selling, say you're an engineer or a scientist or something. So if this buying process now happens well before the salesperson, then of course we need you involved earlier in the journey. And when we don't have to hand it off, right? If the relationship is started with you on the video and then you're there to engage for the first time on LinkedIn, that goes a lot smoother for people. So
I wonder if salespeople are afraid if the content is so good, they'll lose their jobs. But the reality is that content enables a salesperson to bring them down the funnel faster and close the deals faster. But you have to train salespeople on how to use that content.
right.
My favorite thing ever is when a sales team says, "Where's the content? We don't have any freaking content. Our content sucks." And you're like, "But there's so much content. You just don't know what to do with it."
Yeah. And that's
I have to admit that the situations I've been in, it wasn't the case of there's so much content. It was the case of we're new to the team and there's a void in both sales enablement content and content marketing. And at that point, with limited resources, there's that little prioritization game where sales teams and sales leaders feel more comfortable prioritizing sales enablement content, something as simple as sales decks and data sheets and sales
Like the
sheets,
battle card, right?
the
Yeah.
battle cards, correct.
Yeah.
And nobody is comfortable reallocating resources to quote unquote marketing. Because I say that because they do not truly understand the role of marketing here. They have this whole checklist of we need our battle cards ready, and once those are done, then we can entertain any additional content to be created. And that's like a never-ending cycle because companies are always innovating. Hopefully, they're always coming out with new products. They're always updating their existing products. So that feels like a shifting goalpost of there's always something more to do. There's always an update to the sales deck. There's always an update to the data sheets. And by the time we're done, the initial one needs some updates. At that point, it's obvious that it's a resource challenge.
Sure.
And how is it possible to get out of that treadmill and be able to sell the idea of we'll do one of your battle cards, but then we shall do this awareness level content or this consideration
Thought
level
leadership
content that
series.
is
Yeah.
not gonna help you in your sales call, but is gonna allow us to give you leads that are already halfway down the funnel for you. Then you don't have to tell them the whole story all over again.
Because an educated buyer is a better buyer, right? It almost feels like there should be two teams. The product marketing team should be doing the battle cards. The product marketing team should be doing the sell sheets. Your content marketing team is doing tofu content before the close. And then, of course, there's some crossover, But product marketers often don't really like to write, or they're not good writers. So those teams often lack the marketing chops. So one solution is to hire a writer for the product marketing team with a dotted line reporting into the product group, and then a dotted line reporting into the content or the brand manager, right? Hire a copywriter who can help them write that kind of content. But that's different content than thought leadership or awareness or middle of the funnel how-to content or product-led, conversion, bottom of the funnel content. It's a different type of content. It's even a different type of writer. Again, I go back to trivializing the qualifications that people need to do a great job with content marketing.
Chris, every time I hear someone coming, from a SaaS background, I feel like you and I have chosen the wrong industry to try marketing in. Everybody describes these elaborate marketing organizations, and I'm like, yes, these all make sense. But every marketing team I've been on has either been just me or a 3-person team, 2 of which one is handling full-time events and the other is just a graphic designer. And
so here's the solution. Right, exactly. So you've got these smart people who are saddled with way more work than they can handle with 16 areas of expertise required, right? So why not hire fractionals or why not hire contractors? You don't need a full-time content marketing strategist, right? You don't need somebody on your staff, but you need the expertise, right? And a really strong content marketer can bring together SEO, social, writing, sales enablement, thought leadership. But it's not a junior person. It's not, somebody who's been a blogger for 4 years. It's not a junior person. That's just it.
It's not a Marcom coordinator.
Definitely not. No, it's not. And, those people are needed on teams for different roles, but for a strategic function like content marketing, it's also important for businesses to stop thinking about content marketing as a cost center and start looking at it as a revenue generator. It's not a cost like printer paper. It's a revenue generator, like the sales team. Think of it as another guy in the room who's making sales.
So
if you spend $100,000 a year on content marketing, which is less than a sales salary, right? If you spend $100,000 a year on content marketing, which would be a fairly healthy budget, right? What is that, $8,000 a month? And I'd be shocked if you didn't get the revenue or the leads equivalent to a pretty solid sales team member.
Right. And I think that's where the importance of budgeting, staffing, training, properly comes into play, because it's certainly easy to waste all that money too. So if you're going to be talking to a manufacturing leader and they're like, okay, I'm bought into this content marketing thing, business is booming, budget is not an issue, what am I staffing for? Like, how am I bringing it into the organization?
Yeah. Business is booming. Budget is not an issue. Has anybody ever said that? But okay, so you've got a CEO or a chief growth officer who's bought into content. He or she is sure that it's the way to go. They're convinced. So I would start with a senior level strategist who can also write. That person can do some writing or manage contractors themselves, right? Manage, depending on the industry, I always advocate for specialist writers. There are many gifted generalist writers, but depending on the industry, you probably actually need specialization. It just smooths so much out if the writer knows the subject matter. But the starting hire is a senior content marketing manager. Yeah, and there are lots of us. There are a lot of talented content marketing managers. They either come from an SEO background, or they come from a writing background, or they've been marketing generalists who've come to specialize in content because they love it, or have educated themselves. Start there. And that person can engage a social media strategist or a blogger or whatever is needed. Don't start, let me say this, don't start by just hiring a writer. And I really don't want to hate on writers. There's a lot of very talented writers out there, but writing and strategy are two different things. A lot of writers don't want to be strategists. They don't even want to do that work, but they're excellent when it comes to being given an assignment, write this blog. They write a compelling, educational, highly converting piece, but they don't want to do the strategy. So a strategist with writing chops.
I have a niche or unusual advice. There may be someone on your product or engineering team that is eager to break out of engineering and into marketing. That might not be a bad idea to get them, on a training project to transition towards marketing, because they are the best subject matter expert. And I believe teaching writing is not, the worst way to go about it. It's hard to teach the product, but if they already know the product, teaching them how to write and getting them an editor basically could be a good shortcut. I know people like Adam Kimmel. I know people like Adam Kimmel, or such as myself. I started my career as an industrial engineer. I worked around 6 years between design and application, and I pivoted into marketing. So like it was easier for me to, talk about the technical aspects, talk about the jargon. It was easier for me to go into, a new industry that I haven't never worked in, but because of my engineering background, it's easy for me to, pick the spots and learn quickly. And just sometimes if you're not finding the right writer and you're not trusting their expertise, because we've had those conversations before with leaders who are bought into the content marketing but can't seem to get comfortable with the idea that someone who's not living and breathing their business is able to understand their business enough to write content about it and educate their customers.
I love the idea of investing in a product marketer or an engineer who wants to transition to marketing or writing, putting them through a content marketing course. There's a number of good ones out there. A company, they're not expensive, $1,000, $1,200, training them and then bringing them over to the marketing team, because bringing all that expertise is it's huge.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like this is exactly why you start with a higher level position, because that person can see some of these things internally and be like, oh my God, we have 1,000 application notes already. We've got this person traveling around to trade shows, giving talks, creating new presentations each time. That's the old content marketing. Like how do we put that over here on a website that looks good and is consumable? And if they're used to doing it, the amount of sales content that those groups create on a weekly basis, right? That was my favorite piece of just, hey, we're not doing anything you haven't done before. We're just doing it in slightly different processes. So now we make this content and it serves the video we want to do, or it goes onto the social post, right? And one of my favorite stories is like, using, so we're HubSpot partners as well. And I've loved working with that tool and, working with, an experienced scientist, right? That's used to might give us a Word doc to say, hey, here's our new application note, make it look pretty. And instead using a tool, there's lots of tools available that can do this. It's like, hey, this is just like a Word doc, except it's in this platform. And when you're finished, we're a couple button clicks away from a web page, right? And just understanding that the subject matter expertise you have is usually already up to something really cool, and figuring out how to use it. And again, that's why you bring in the strategist first, because that is a big part, is how do we use the resources that we have, and then which resources do we need to support the goals. So
you're so right. There's always 2, 3, 4 brilliant people in an organization who have something to say. They're working on something cool. They're doing webinars. They're already doing cool stuff, but there's like a chasm between what they're doing and making it be useful content. But a strategist can bridge that gap. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. But all of a sudden, your strategist is using the clips on social. They're writing a blog post out of it. They put together a template. They're just kind of remixing and repurposing this organic content to bring in more business. Yeah. Right. So we should talk about the difference between subject matter experts and thought leaders.
Yes.
Yes.
Happy to dig in. Please do.
Because it's another area where people trivialize the amount of work or the type of people that need to be involved. But subject matter experts are just that. They're experts, right? In a particular area. They are often engineers, scientists, they're experts, product experts. But a thought leader is someone with an opinion, and it's someone who possibly already has a personal brand, like they already are on social, is somebody who possibly is a bit of an extrovert. It's somebody who doesn't mind having their name on things. But that's so many subject matter experts are introverts. They hate to write. They don't want their name out there. They're always like, I don't have an opinion. I don't have anything to say. But you have to groom them. You have to bring that out of them. You might need to assign a ghostwriter. You need to prep them and help them understand why thought leadership is good for their career and good for their brand and good for the company's brand. It takes some doing, but a lot of people think SME equals thought leader. It just does not.
And that's the missing part of for me, it was the part of the resources that I couldn't ever get, is the training and the coaching piece, right? Because it was so nice, like, to work with somebody who's used to doing webinars well, right? Used to being on camera. But then when you switch to the next subject matter expert and they haven't done it before, and now like, hey, it's great that we have an initiative that we're just going to start being on video. That doesn't mean everybody's ready to start being on video. So, right. So the training and coaching is, sometimes one of the most important roles of that strategist and of the budget overall.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I really don't see a lot of people talking about that, but the role of the content strategist to groom people to be thought leaders, because if your business doesn't have a thought leader, doesn't take a stand, doesn't have something interesting and different to say through your people, then kind of what are you doing? Like, I know you got smart people working there. It could be the CEO, it could be the engineer. And if you're not elevating that person to help you articulate relevance and credibility for your brand, you're missing out on so much.
I'm interested in digging deeper in that. From what I've witnessed, everybody has an opinion behind the scenes. Nobody has an opinion in public, and every time leaders prefer to fall in line instead of being, I wouldn't say disruptive, just different, and instead of everybody having the same features and benefits because they're kind of basically making the same product with little differences, uh, they are more comfortable doing that and just eating the scraps off of the incumbent versus trying to do something different. Have you encountered that, and how do you tackle it?
So much. It's scary to be different, right? And conservative leadership doesn't want to be different. They don't want to be bold. They say we want to be bold, like that's a buzzword. Let's be bold. But then they don't really mean that. They don't really want to be bold. They're afraid of alienating their target market. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I mean, there's a lot of fear around what it means to be bold and to have an opinion. I don't know how else to differentiate when you're talking about a product category that has a lot of different vendors who provide the same service or have the same product. So putting out an opinion that's different is a little bit scary. What if you're wrong? What if you turn people off? What if you turn off half of the buyers? Maybe they weren't your target market anyway. But if you think if you raise something, an interesting opinion, an interesting approach, and put it out on the market and generate conversation and awareness for your brand, I'm going to say, how much does it even matter if that opinion changes over time? The point is that you've raised awareness. You've showed yourself as a thought leader, right? And if your opinion changes in 2 months, great. But shows you're thinking about things. You're on the edge of the industry. You're bringing it to the public. I don't know why it's so scary, but everybody says, let's be bold, and then they really don't mean it.
In fact, there's an extra layer to the fear. There's an extra layer to the fear, which is executives are scared of turning subject matter experts into thought leaders because if you have a thought leader that's already good at what they do, now they're an attractive prospect for poaching from a competitor, and they're more worried about that prospect than be worried about their own marketing and the fact that they're just blending into a sea of sameness, and their pipelines are slowly dwindling into oblivion. It's I have to admit I've never been in one of those shoes, so I can't claim to understand why that happens. But it feels so straightforward that the risk that you incur of elevating your thought leaders is so much smaller than the upside that the company could gain by becoming, a trendsetter in the space and getting everybody to rally behind the brand and think like you do. That makes differentiation much easier because you can now be the only one in the conversation with and not have your competitors, be in the same sentence.
Right. I had a CMO recently tell me that he didn't want to put forward any thought leaders from the company because he was afraid they were going to leave the company, and he didn't want their name on the website. He didn't want their name on social. And I was like, I didn't at the time, I didn't really know what to say, but I was thinking, if your corporate culture is good, and if you're convincing this person that it's good for their brand, if you've done the work behind helping them understand why thought leadership is important, you're not going to leave. Like, if your corporate culture is good and you're paying them well and you're helping them build their own brand and you're helping them with their career, I don't think they're going to leave. And even if they do, then you can pull that content. Like, it's just not that. Please don't worry about that.
I have to admire John Franco, one of the co-founders of Gorilla 76, which is another industrial marketing agency. He said that exactly. He said they experienced a thought leader leaving their company, and he said, it's on us to keep her. It's not on them to, stay behind. If they felt the need to move on to greener pastures, it means we weren't enough. And he he is one of two co-founders that encourage their team to be active on LinkedIn and build their own brands because they understand that that furthers the company's brand. And he said it like it's on us to make their situation better and make them feel like they do not need to leave.
Right, exactly. So let's be clear. If you want a strong thought leadership program, and if you want to differentiate through thought leadership, then you need to facilitate a corporate culture that supports thought leadership.
Yeah. And I think trying to be empathetic here, it comes back to they've never had to do this before, and like it's still seen as optional, right? So if it's optional, then I don't have to worry about all the things. But that's where it's not optional anymore. The thought leadership is important. Like you can't hide the subject matter expertise
Yeah, no,
anymore.
it's
Like
really not
you can't
optional
wait for
anymore.
it to get to the sales conversation because then it's too late, right? So you have to put this stuff out there. And then once you accept that, now it's like, oh, maybe I need to have a good culture to make sure, right? And so I get where they're coming from when they feel like it's boiling the ocean, but until the understanding's there, this is not an option, right? Which I don't know if it's coming this year, probably not. Maybe in 5 to 10 years it'll be seen, but it's just interesting to think about. But I want to, while you're here, I'm super interested in your concept of global at the start, because it's so easy to do a lot of stuff. And this is the fun and the double-edged sword of marketing, right? Is you can do a lot of work and then you realize you didn't account for one variable. You're like, okay, now we have to redo all of it, literally. So close to home for me is the overwhelm related to, okay, we have a global audience and we're getting good at understanding we have to have the right message at the right time, and across these different industries, and we've done it in English, and now like, oh, we've got other languages, other cultures to think about. Why can't we just help get Google Translate's help to just
Please don't
and
do that.
again add that hat onto the person that speaks Spanish in the organization. Take us through the mindset needed to just this global at the start concept.
Yeah, you bet. So the fact of the matter is that a lot of revenue opportunity is outside of the English-speaking market, right? That's fact one. Fact two is that if your business is online, it's already global. It's already global. So once you start getting a sense that people outside of your home market are engaging with your content, buying from you, whatever, you'll start to get the sense that you have an opportunity somewhere else. Most businesses at that stage go, oh, we need to translate into Spanish or Japanese or whatever, and then they start finding translators. A better approach is to recognize that your business growth is going to be global and create your content and your product also in a way that will adapt easily for other markets. And there's multiple ways to do that. So when you're developing content, you can either create content that is generically applicable to everyone, right? A global content, but that's not very spicy, interesting content because it's generic. Or you can start building a strategy that adapts that content for the different markets and then go on to adapt it by translation and in many cases recreating that content for a new market. It's not just words. You don't just need to convert the words. You need to change the colors sometimes. You need to change the images sometimes. Inside of a product or a website, when you translate, say, English to German or English to Spanish, those languages are 30% longer. Like the sentences are 30. So it breaks your website, okay? It breaks your app. So there's a lot of engineering in there that you need to plan for if you're going to take your product global. And there's a lot to it. I'm going to recommend a book for people who are interested in this, and it's called Take Your Company Global, and the author is Natalie Kelly, Natal Kelly. So that's a great book, just basic concepts about how you should start thinking about your business in a global way. at the start, and what to do if you're in the middle. If you've been in business for 30 years and you're realizing you're a manufacturer who needs to start selling in Spain, it's good for that kind of level of awareness too. So I urge businesses, when I talk about this, to just start thinking about where their customers are or where they need to be, and to start thinking about the differences in language and culture that you need to be aware of so you can sell into that market. So an awareness is a good place to start. And reading that book is a good place to start.
For anyone interested in that book, we'll make sure to include a link in the show notes. Lee, is there like a simple checklist for companies to go through and understand, is a global content marketing strategy needed for them or not? Like what are the items that they can go through and say, okay, we definitely qualify for needing a global content marketing strategy?
Yeah. I'm going to frame this in terms of your audience, which is mostly manufacturing and distribution companies, right? So those are going to be bigger organizations, probably with worldwide offices, probably even with employees around the world doing the manufacturing. They're already global. They probably already need to be doing translation and localization for their internal purposes, training, all hands meetings, and so on. Probably are already being translated. So they're probably already there. I bet your customers are probably already aware that they've got global customers. So the first box is checked, aware. We've got customers and employees all over the world. So then you have to start prioritizing which languages. There's 7,000 languages in the world. You can't do them all. So you have to start prioritizing languages and markets. And start small is my advice to people. Don't try to eat the whole elephant. Start small. Pick one market. Pick a subset of your content. Make sure that your product works for that market. So start small. Be aware. Look who's buying your product. Pick one market and start small.
Yeah, and I think starting small is key, because this is one place for sure that you cannot cut corners on the resources if you're trying to be successful. My favorite anecdote is that we had a product that we like to use the word rugged as like, this was the one, like, I couldn't get rid of that word to save my life as the marketing person, and it worked in certain situations. But when we translated it to Spanish, actually, my wife, that's her first language, like told me what it implied in Spanish, and it's basically like a manly man type thing. And it's like, okay, can't just like, that doesn't mean anything related to this product now.
I have super funny stories. You've actually damaged your brand, right? Like
Right.
when they tried to translate Kentucky Fried Chicken for one of the Asian markets, they translated it to eat your fingers off. So finger looking good became eat your fingers off. There's an airlines called Braniff whose tagline was to fly in leather. So the idea is we've got leather seats. It's super luxury. But when they translated that for market in Europe, it translated as to fly naked. Well, that's a different experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe not what you wanted to say. So yes, I mean, you can screw it up completely with poor translation. It can all go very wrong.
I didn't start my marketing career in English, and
okay.
I worked in a very technical field where a lot of machinery had some specific nomenclature, like naming schemes that did not translate. Like there were different words for these same machines in French, in English, and in Arabic. And I do admit that a lot of the times we had to reach out to our, French partners and ask them, hey, what is this called? Like we always relied on, multinational partners to just bail us out whenever we're trying to communicate, because as soon as we changed languages, all the expertise for our subject matter experts suddenly disappeared, and even if we have a translator, even if they're not just putting it into an AI or a Google Translate of sorts, they're still not communicating the technical aspects correctly. And recently we had a podcast with a gentleman from Europe, and I secretly messaged Chris, was like, we have it really easy, us marketers who only market in English, I have to say.
It adds so many more layers. That's why I said tackle one market, tackle one region, because so for example, if you tackle Spanish, well, which country are you talking about? There's 26 of them. Like, that's overwhelming. Pick one market, one language, start there.
Yeah.
But the good news is that the content strategy you put together for your home market can adapt for your target market. The buyer might be different. The brand connotation might be different, but take what you've got and adapt it. And again, hire a specialist, hire somebody in that market who knows what they're doing to adapt your strategy for that market. There's no starting from scratch if you already have a content strategy.
Right. And I think that's the key, is that it must be adapted in some way. And nobody's saying like you have to go out and do this stuff. But that's where, if there's business goals related to growing in new markets, in new places, then let's connect what's actually needed to do that. It's not just turning a website page into Spanish. And sure, you'll get some forms, like you'll get some form fills. But as soon as you start putting all this energy without actually putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to sell to, it's a losing battle.
Right. It's like, wop. Yeah. So the statistic is that 75% of buyers prefer to buy in their own language. So I might be bilingual, but I prefer to buy in English because that's my native language. I speak Spanish, but I'm going to go to a Spanish-speaking website and click on the American flag so I can get my native language. That's true across the world. 75% prefer to buy in their own language. So it's a huge competitive advantage, right?
Right.
If your competitor hasn't translated their content or their website and you're all selling in Europe, then they're way behind you. It's a huge competitive advantage.
Chris, where do I fall? I prefer to buy in English as well.
Where were you born?
I was born in Lebanon in the Middle East.
Okay.
So I speak Arabic as it's my first language. But I also, when I was in Lebanon, I used to turn on the English, the English flag, so I can understand what's going on.
Oh, you're like uber. So I would call you bilingual and bicultural. You're like,
well, technically trilingual.
Okay.
I speak French
yeah,
as well, but
rub it in our faces. I'm sure the person maybe bilingual, like just Americans are the worst.
all I'm gonna say is I wish my French was Spanish instead.
Fair enough.
On that note, now that I've angered everybody in France, Lee, this was a pleasure. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, sure. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, every day. So you can look me up, Lee Densmer, and my website is globiacontent.com. But LinkedIn's a great place to actually have a conversation with me.
And your content is great to follow. You should definitely check her out. We'll be leaving a link to her profile in the comments. In the show notes. And with that, thank you again, Lee, and for everybody listening. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the next one.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Lee.